Morning, everyone, and welcome. My name's Piero Mardesic from Addicted to Grow, and we are here today with the amazing Nathaniel Bibby. Mate, welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm stoked to be here.
Mate, I just want to set the platform a little bit for all the listeners, and the whole idea behind the podcast and those that have been listening already, it's conquer your uncomfortable, the boy behind the man. And the more that I keep digging into people's struggles, adversities, and addictions from their past, a lot of women are actually starting to reach out and say, you know, is there any reason you don't want to reach out to women? And I kind of said, shit, I'm only speaking sort of from a man's perspective or a boy's perspective. So, yeah, I'd be happy to. So there's a couple of women that are jumping on now. And you may, after this, even have some suggestions that we could talk about off air. But the whole idea stemmed from when I started to write my bio on a book that I'm writing in regards with Conquer Your Uncomfortable, Unleash Your Potential. I started to write out my 0 to 21. When I started to write out my 0 to 21, I realized that late 30s, I overcame an addiction to attention seeking, being liked, which stemmed from pornography addiction at the age of 10. And then that carried out throughout all of my teenage years and hiding behind the fear of being truly found out, that I was actually afraid to just talk to women and ask them out, and hiding behind that kind of thing. Even in business, my business career excelled because I could hide from what was going on behind the scenes, which in a way is almost like a double-edged sword and a blessing in disguise. So when you think about that, if you go back to your boyhood, there may or may not be any struggles or adversity or addictions, but what was it like when you were growing up? Like, and let's go back to, say, the age of, say, 5 or 6.
Okay, sure. Thanks for sharing that with me, by the way. I appreciate your vulnerability. Look, I have an interesting background. I was born in England. When I was 5, I've figured this stuff out later, but when I was 5, my parents were going through financial troubles and, credit cards maxed out, mortgage not being paid. And my dad was an entrepreneur from a very poor family. First business was, doing a bakery round, and it was learned that if, you could do that, you could also be knocking on the doors selling life insurance. And he started a financial services business. And I think he had somewhere around 15 salespeople. And then there was a big crash. So everything's maxed out. And coming from the background that he didn't really have the mentors around him to go and seek advice. So he decided to go to a club, where wealthy individuals hang out. And he spoke to this guy in a suit at the bar, and he said to him, he said, "You look like a very successful man. If you were in my shoes and you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go to make money and do business?" And he said, "Hong Kong." And so my dad spent what little money he had on a flight to Hong Kong, one-way flight. And, from a childhood's perspective, I thought Dad had left. I was like, where's Dad gone? But 3 months later, my mum had tied up all the loose ends in England. He'd managed to repay all the debts. He flew us all over to Hong Kong. We had a 5-story house on the beach that we moved into. So he managed to solve those problems relatively quickly. And then, being in Hong Kong, my parents had an idea about, the standard of education. Sorry, that's Marshall in the background. Standard of education that we would receive. And, boarding school was quite a prestigious thing. And my mum always thought, if I can afford it, I'll send my kids to boarding school. But rather than go back to England, which is quite far away, I decided to come to Perth. And I do feel like I had a big say in the decision, and so when I was 10, I started boarding school in Perth. So, yeah, I mean, that's how I grew up, a very international lifestyle. The next biggest thing that impacted me was when my parents got divorced when I was 14. They all play a role in shaping the man that I've become.
So when you go back to that moment when you thought Dad left, were there have you ever thought deeply about this? Have you ever thought to yourself, hang on a minute, what does that mean about me? Did you go through any of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As you're probably aware, I think we've talked about this before, PJ, I've done a lot of personal development. The event that had the biggest impact on me was the first time I went to see Tony Robbins live. I went back to that moment in a closed eye exercise and realized that I had some abandonment issues that I hadn't dealt with. And Tony does a technique called timeline therapy, where you go before the event, you go after the event from a overhead perspective. And kind of long story short, I left with a perspective that, I wasn't left. Sometimes when people leave, it's so that they can rescue you. My dad was actually doing it because he loved me. And it gave me I don't know, it just gave me a sense of calm, I guess, through experiencing that. And I think I've got a much better relationship with my father. And, I've had similar things with other members of family. I think when you get older, it's time to take responsibility for the resentments and things that you carry around with you. And it benefits you in the long run. I mean, it leads to happiness, really.
100%. And I just want to share with the audience this idea of timeline therapy, because what Nathaniel spoke about is something that I'm a practitioner of, which is timeline therapy, taught actually through Tony Robbins programming. So what you do is you pick an event in your life, or the event actually comes to you, and it's an event that's actually got significant emotional attachment to it. So for the audience, we don't remember memories. We remember emotions that are attached to the memory or the event. So in those moments, it's usually about like a 3-part story, which is what actually happened, what did you make it mean to yourself, but what was it actually about? So when Nathaniel was talking about timeline therapy and looking before the event and above the event and sort of in front of the event, what actually happens is you actually find the truth behind that. And at that moment, whether it's usually it's emotional. And what we do is we make up a story, which is a default or a coping mechanism that we then create and believe. So very familiar with the...
You just made me think of something else, PJ. As a result of doing that, Tony did another exercise after that, which was your earliest memory. And my earliest memory prior to going to that event was when I was 5 years old and my dad left. And when we did this exercise, my earliest memory, I could literally remember when I was 2 years old, my dad gave me a toy fire engine when my sister was born, because he thought, because my sister would be getting all of the attention, that he would give me a gift. And apparently I just threw it on the floor because I wanted to meet my sister. And I called him up during the event and I said, Dad, when Camilla was born, did you give me a toy fire engine? And he said, how the hell can you remember that? That was my earliest memory went from being a traumatic one to being a really good one. So
this is so impactful right now for the audience to hear. When we think about our lives, we'll automatically think of struggles or pain are usually the first that come up. One, because they're the most deepest rooted emotional pain or emotional memory, which the emotions attached to that and anchored into our memories. So Nathaniel, this is going to be really good just to play with this right now and for the help for the audience. So when you actually did that work during this event, what was the benefit again when you walked away?
I'm just trying to
remember. What was the happy part you took from it again?
I'm trying to remember. I know what the biggest benefit was of going to the event. I'm not sure if it's a direct result of that particular exercise or not. I'm trying to think. Because what's happened is, I think up until that point, I was spending a lot of my I made a lot of my decisions really based on seeking the approval of my father. I love my dad. He's great. He's a legend. Absolutely love him to death. But that is never going to happen. I'm never going to get the approval at the level that I wanted it. So I was chasing something that was pretty much guaranteed to make me miserable.
So this is really intriguing. So if you're listening to the audience, when these things happen, obviously I want to share the best I can to my psychological training. So what's actually happening here in this moment is Nathaniel's talking about an event that he had significant emotional attachment to, which was painful. And then what he did from then on, as part of this coping mechanism, defensive mechanism, default, what he did was he put his father on a pedestal in order to continue to try and gain approval from him. And as you listen to these ongoing podcasts as an audience, you're going to realize that when we put people on a pedestal, like exactly what Nathaniel said, you'll never be able to actually reach that. That person, no matter how much they try, they will never be able to reach that because you've put that person so far on that pedestal that you're always going to be waiting for, well, why can't they just say I'm good enough? So when did you go to the Tony Robbins event?
It must have been about 7 years ago. So I've been to about 11 or 12 events of Tony Robbins since.
Wow.
So I did them all as a participant, and then, I got so much value out of it. I was like, I've got to find a way to keep involved in this community, but also contribute to others. So I started volunteering to go, and it was really weird. Everyone's like, "What? Well, would you get paid to do that? What are you doing that for?" Like, I'm stopping my business for a week. I'll go there, and I'll get so much out of, like, you see everyone arrive, and they're all like, they've got body languages down, and then sort of you're like, "Hey," and they don't want to talk to you really, and then when they leave, they're dancing, and they're like, the transformations that are made during that event. I mean, is phenomenal. And I've never met anybody that's have said they didn't have a good experience. Anyone that's ever bagged Tony Robbins, you always ask them, have you been to one of his events? Have you been to one of his events? They probably haven't.
That's right.
He's making a huge impact.
Yeah, he is. So when you think about that, like, if you're one of the key takeaways that I want all the audience to understand is that everyone has those struggles, adversities, and addictions from their past. And all it's doing, it doesn't matter. I talk about it from an addiction point of view, but if you've got struggles and adversity and you're hiding behind something of truly being found out, what it's really doing is it's stopping you from living the freedom that you truly are denying yourself. That is it.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, if you're driving in your car right now, you're on the highway, wherever you may be, if you're sitting at the office and you're just like, what are these two guys rattling on about? There's no problems with me. I guarantee that if you sit there for 5 minutes and there's part of you that just goes, hang on a minute, I'm smoking, or you know what, I actually love reading books, but I would rather read a book than go out on the weekend. And I'm not saying that reading a book is any different. What I'm saying is, where are you hiding these little addictions or struggles or defense mechanisms from actually creating a life by design? So now I just want to draw it back to, the age of 10, and you remember you were going between, your mum was going to decide to send you to boarding school. Perth. Yep. You came to Perth. Yep. Yeah. Cool. So obviously in Perth, so that was completely new to you, and then you're obviously this international child. So you had one sister, you said.
Yeah, she's 2 years younger. She came over when she was 10, so 2 years later.
2 years later, she came over. Okay. So now, if you go back to 10, what was it like having a sister that was 2 years younger, going through that adolescent period?
Well, when I went to boarding school, I was a lot younger than the other kids. I was probably too young looking back, but my parents saw it as like an awesome opportunity. It's so exciting. Nathaniel's going to get this massive education. Whereas, like the first 2 weeks you're in boarding school, the way that they try to get you to adjust to being there is you don't talk to your parents at all for 2 weeks. And, so I was like a lot younger than the other kids. The first night I was there, the son, if you're listening, you asshole, the son of the health minister of WA beat me up. It's the first time I've been beaten up. He comes over, I was unpacking my stuff, and I put my friends from Hong Kong in a framed picture on my bedside table, and he sort of threw it on the ground. And I said, "Hey, what are you doing that for?" And he just jumped on me and started thumping me. I'll never forget that. I was bullied quite a bit at the start, but it didn't last very long. All it took is one day I had the courage to throw a punch back, and then they stopped bullying me after that. But but it was quite traumatic at the time. And I think it's hard for me now because I'm really grateful for the experience. Like, it gave me so much. At the time it was probably difficult, but. It was difficult, but I grew up a lot quicker. I'm a lot more independent. There's a lot of things that I've done in my life that my friends from school haven't done. That's a lot of them sort of have this expectation laid in front of them to get a job, get married, have the kids. Yep. So I've lived as an adult, I've lived in Thailand, Hong Kong, China. I speak Chinese. I speak Thai.
Wow.
I'm 36 years old. I'm not married yet. I don't have children. So I've made a lot of these. I don't know, I made a lot of different decisions, I think.
Yep.
It's got a lot to do with my upbringing.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned something before in regards with being bullied and so on. If you touch base on the bullying part, and you said it didn't really last long, but like, was there any stories you told yourself during that? Was there like another story of like, I'm not good enough, or why are they picking on me? Is it because I'm young, or was there anything like that, or is it?
Oh yeah, yeah, massive. Yeah, I just used to keep my head down, try not to get noticed. Yeah.
So when you were doing that, was there like a lot of fear? Did you still compete in things, or did you just
Um,
like, did you ever let it
yeah.
hold you back?
I think I probably conformed a little bit. Like I was really good at tennis,
Yep.
and I probably did the opposite. I probably tried to gain their approval more. So like all the cool kids played basketball, so I quit tennis and started playing basketball.
Yeah.
I always regret doing that because I was really good at tennis. Like I was really good for my age group, you know.
Yeah, it's really funny. I've had two conversations with high performance people, yourself and Tom Waterhouse, and he loved tennis as well. You love
Okay.
tennis. I love tennis. It's. I just love. I love tennis as well. Who are you going for, by the way? Australian Open. Who do you put?
Oh, I, to be honest, I don't follow. Like this is the thing.
You don't follow it.
I didn't stick in it, so I'm not good at it now. I was when I was 10.
So
at least
you're
I
an
can
80s
shoot. I can shoot a few hoops. I'm like mediocre at most sports. And
Okay, that's good. So you're good to be a generalist, right?
Yeah.
So okay, so you switched over to basketball. You're an 80s kid, so who's your favorite team?
Oh, I don't know if you've seen the Jordan documentary that was released on Netflix recently, but it's awesome, isn't it? It's hard to
It
go
just
past.
brings back all the memories, right?
Yeah, phenomenal. Like very inspirational for anyone that's looking to achieve anything. But I think, like growing up, and I think that this would apply to. I don't think any child's immune to this, but seeking approval is a big part of adolescence and being a teenager. Like unfortunately, when my sister came to boarding school, she didn't cope as well with the bullying. Well, I don't know if I coped with it well, but so she had to become a day girl, and I didn't really get into trouble much in school until I was 14, and my parents got divorced. Like it was a good thing. Like they were fighting all the time. Like it was a good thing they were getting divorced. But I just wanted their attention, and I found that the easiest way to do it, because I was away from home, was to get in trouble. It's a weird. Like I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but when I look back on it, that's exactly what I was doing.
This actually brings up such a powerful point, though, is because when there's lack of how can I reframe this so that the audience can stick with me here? When there is a lack of attention of love in the family, that means that it spreads out to everyone else, because how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if there's a lack of love coming from the head of, I'm even going to relate this to business, which I don't want to, but it's going there. When there's a lack of love from the business, like there's a lack of love in the family, it doesn't get filtered through, which means then children pick it up. And exactly what you just said just then, right? Because the same thing happened with my parents. They never broke up, but there became this like, my mum would talk about it, and mum, if you're listening, I want you to respectively understand that, there was part of them that they said, we'll stay together for kids. That was part of them that said that. Now, whether or not, that was their choice. But when you're saying that, like you then mucked up to then get the attention. And this is the adversity that I'm talking about that kids can go through now. And not only that, it's like men now, respectively, can still do this in current relationships to get attention.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want it to sound like I'm, that they weren't great parents, because the reason that it didn't go off the rails, is because of them as well. My dad,
100%.
My mum and dad both played a role in keeping me on track in their own way. I'm so fortunate, to be honest. Like, to have those parents, because like if I didn't have that, I could see how it would have easily led to a whole different life, because some of the things that I didn't think were important then, they did have stood me in good stead. Yeah.
Well, that actually brings up another point, and I know that you and I have both touched on this, but I'm just going to ask you a really crazy question that I was asked that put me on the spot, but it was very eye-opening. Have you ever? I know that you and I both come from a place of privilege, which is really, we're lucky. We really are. Have you ever had a tipping point in your life, or have you always had a privilege? That's the first part of the question. And the second part is, then what's driving you now to help others? Because some people think that it's a lot harder to actually come from a place of privilege to help others rather than a place of struggle.
Yeah. What do you mean by privilege?
So what I mean by privilege is you and I both, okay, so I'm just going to set the ground. Let's talk about someone from the Bronx. Like, let's just cap that story of the whole Eminem thing, right? That's like a place of, that's not privilege.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like Eminem, what's his real name? I forgot right now.
Marshall.
Respect to you, brother.
Marshall.
So
I named
same
my
as
dog
Marshall.
after him.
Same as Marshall the dog. So he didn't come from a place of privilege at all, right? Lived in a trailer park, very blah, very.
Yeah. Understood what you're saying.
So,
Look, but I think it's also important to note that, like, you can't really compare one person's problems with the other, because there's a kid that's like got a wealthy parents that lives in a good suburb that went to the best school that could be just as miserable and doesn't feel like they're justified to tell anyone because they've got all these things. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just how you feel. It's your mindset.
And that's 100% point behind the story that I was trying to get at. Is that when I was asked that question, I said, well, it doesn't matter what I had, place of privilege, or whether I had a tipping point or a real pain point, is because at the end of the day, it was everything that I made it mean. So therefore, now trying to help others, if anything, is even more of a benefit, because it's like, I know the addiction, but I also knew what it was like to be privileged with the addiction. And my addiction was about, my father working 12 hours a day, three weeks in a row shift work. So I would barely see him. I had to be quiet when he was home. I could hardly talk to him. I would see him down the shed and he would tell me what to do, try again, do this, do that. I was always looking for his approval, very much like you. But what that drove me to was this idea of like, oh, well, I'm not getting attention off him, but he would sit at nighttime and enjoy those movies. So I was hearing it.
Yeah.
So then I started listening, like watching it. That's where it came from. But when you think about this right now and you go, hang on a minute, this is the point exactly that I'm trying to share with the audience. And that is, you could be rich and still have the struggle, but you just don't, like you said, you don't want to speak up because of fear of like, everyone's just going to
sometimes in some respects it's harder if you come from a privileged background, because sometimes you want to hold on to the problem because it's doing so much for you. You're getting all this certainty, you're getting all the significance. Like sometimes when I speak to people who have like blame people that are close to them, I obviously love them, but resent them for not, for whatever reason. That. And I say, well, hey, you could, have you considered changing your perspective so that you could be grateful and happy? But they don't. It's one thing to like they could completely they could understand exactly how to do that in most of their life, but in this area, they're like, why should I have to do that? And I said, well, and I could say, well, because then you'll be happy. And they're like, no, I shouldn't have to do that. They should apologize to me.
Yeah,
they don't want to let go of their problem.
Yeah, this is you and I both love Tony. So this whole thing about that leverage, when the problem, when the tipping point becomes, when the benefit of change is greater than the fear of staying the same, is that's when it's going to leverage. And this is exactly, and I want to share with you why this podcast as well, is that because I know that there's a lot of high performance CEOs and senior executives out there that are living behind some truths that they don't want to unearth in fear of like, oh my God, I might be found out. And this is the whole idea, right? So
what a great way to hide your insecurities, have wealth and success and employees. I mean,
100%. And exactly what you said just there is like sometimes it's harder because they're just like, maybe I don't have to if I just go to another charity event, if I go to another party, if I go for another weekend away with like the corporate team, no one else is going to know, right? I can hide it.
That's right.
So the boarding school, when did you go all the way through to year 12 to that?
Oh God, I can't believe I'm going to tell you this. In year 10, I was asked to leave the boarding house. I had to become a day boy. Yeah.
Why?
Well, there's when they have the swimming carnival, and all of the whole school goes to support the school in the swimming, and there's always be chants, and they'd be run by year 12 students. And here's this year 10 student, me, at the front leading the chants, and my housemaster grabs me and he says, "Come here." And he said, "I can smell alcohol in your breath. Have you been drinking?" And I was like, "Well, no." No.
Anyway. So, okay,
Anyway.
cool. Okay, so you became a day rat. That's what we used to call them, because I was a day rat and we had boarders.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you became a day rat. Did your parents send you there for a specific reason, by the way? For disciplinary reasons?
To that school?
Yeah.
No, it's actually, I felt like, I'm sure it was their decision, but it felt at the time like it was my choice. Like I went there and I was like, "Dad, I want to go to this school."
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
great school.
Were they living in Hong Kong at the time, or they were in Perth and they sent you there?
Yeah. So they're in Hong Kong. When my parents got divorced, my mum moved down to Perth. And, like I was not planning to go to university. I'd already set up my first business when I was in high school, setting up multiple businesses. That's what I wanted to do. Dad was doing it. In fact, it was a really important thing that Dad did. And my mum did all of the like day-to-day stuff. Like she was, like I admire my mum the most. But my dad in year 11, I wanted to go to Japan. And I said, "Dad, will you pay for me?" I hadn't spoken to him since the divorce. And I said, "Will you pay for me to go to Japan on exchange? I was studying Japanese." And he said, "I will, on one condition. You've got to come up to Hong Kong and live with me for 2 months during your summer holidays between year 11 and year 12. And you're going to work for me. And every meeting I go to, every TV appearance, every seminar, you come with me." And so in year 11, I was actually failing. I was getting like 43% or something like that. My headmaster, my housemaster, my mum, everyone had told me that I need to repeat year 11 in order to get into university and do TE in year 12. And my dad said, "Well, what does Nathaniel think?" I remember we're all in a meeting about me repeating year 11. And everyone's going, "Nathaniel's got to repeat year 11. Mum's like, "No question, he's got to do it." And then finally it gets to my dad and he says, "Well, what does Nathaniel want to do?" And I said, "Well, as I understand it, it only matters what grades you get in year 12. So who cares what I got in year 11? And my dad said, if my son says that he's going to do well in year 12, that's what he's going to do. He's going through. He's not repeating year 11. And so, he had my back. And that really pumped me up. And then, I went and worked with him. And like, we would go out, like, I shouldn't really drop my dad in it like this, but what the hell? Like, we would go out till 2 o'clock in the morning, or 17 or 16 or whatever I was. But then he'd wake me up at 7 a.m. and say, "Come on, we're going to the TV studio." And so I'd go to every single meeting. We'd flying around Asia. I'd listen to his, like what he would say to clients when he was closing deals. And that experience just made me want to achieve more in my studies. So the year 12, I won an award for most improved student. Studied what I wanted to, business, marketing, Chinese at university. I just like, I wanted the degree. So I passed university. I wouldn't say I was a great student, but, I started 2 or 3 businesses while I was there. A lot of these businesses, by the way, weren't successful. I'm just saying, like, I was working on these things. But this is the thing, right? As soon as I left uni, like my dad was doing property developments in Thailand and he hadn't sold a villa in 6 months. And at the time I was learning about online marketing myself. And I was like, why don't I come up and help you? So I got his website, right to the top of Google. So we're getting 10 leads a day. In one high season, we sell 93 properties. This is my first experience out of university. And I just think I'm the man. I'm like, well, this is the first year out of university.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm only going to be more successful after this. And then, there's a global financial crisis, a tsunami, a military coup, and everything just collapsed. My relationship with Dad was obviously like a lot of friction there. And I got headhunted by a company in Hong Kong, and who heard I can get websites to the top of Google. Google updates its algorithm, and my dad's website drops down the rankings. And so I'm like, shit, what am I going to do here? Like, I've been recruited by this company to perform. So I just thought, I've got to learn this Google AdWords stuff. You know, Google Ads had just come out. We were getting clicks for 20 cents, and I got really good at that really quickly. In Hong Kong, I wasn't very happy in Hong Kong. Like, it was just, anyway. But I was still seeking to, like, why would I go to Hong Kong, right? Other than to impress my dad, because that's where he did business, right? Like, he wasn't living there. He was living in Thailand. So it took me a long time to find my feet and get into, marketing where I'm really, really happy. And I did it through a lot of frustration and challenges. I think that those like, I guess, like, looking at your shit and going, do you know what? I'm doing this all for approval, and starting out on your own is fucking hard. Like, it's really hard. But on the other side of it is this, like, I don't know how to explain it. Just, you're a lot calmer. You have a lot more self-confidence. You have a lot more self-respect. I think that's, like, you respect yourself a lot more. And then you forget, you stop caring what other people think. Like, I don't really care what my dad thinks about what I'm doing anymore. But I don't know, in a weird way, he does respect me now.
But that's the really good part. That's the good part, because when the audience, like, as the audience is listening to this, right? Yeah. Because we spoke about putting him on a pedestal before, and you were trying so hard to approve for him. Like, you even did this all the way outside of college. So, all of this to continue in the background, all the way from year, like, 5 years old, even 2, when you were saying about this red car, like, all of this stacks on top of each other and just continues. And like you said, you find this little bit of self-respect afterwards, because you're kind of like, hang on a minute, I think I just had a breakthrough. Why the fuck am I even giving so much of a shit? And you're exactly right, because what's really happening in the world is people are still seeking approval, 40s, 50s, still looking for it, right? And that's sometimes off people that they're sitting next to, right? And we hear it all the time, trying to keep up with the Joneses. No one really gives a shit, but so many people still do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to want more out of life, I guess. But it's very hard if you're doing that to serve others. That if you've got one of the things I often say to business owners is, if you're more concerned with looking successful than being successful, you've got a massive problem, because you're going to make decisions differently. And more I think about it, looking successful is, like, if you're struggling in business and you're more concerned with looking successful, are you going to spend time on appearances, or are you going to spend time actually solving the problem? Like, it's going to work against you at some point, eventually.
Shit, yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Nathaniel Bibby, as we wrap this up, is there anything that you would like to share with the audience about, number one, how to find you, or even just to tie in the whole idea of how you now notice how you conquered your uncomfortable?
Yeah. So do you mind if I just share a quick story?
Please.
So thanks. So when I was living in Melbourne and I was working in online marketing, the company that I was working for went into financial trouble. So I was the best salesperson in the company. I was living in a penthouse in St Kilda, but I hadn't been paid in 3 months. And so I was in financial trouble. I was $20,000 in debt. I quit my job on the day that I got an eviction notice for my apartment building because I wasn't getting paid. I quit my job, came home to the apartment, literally found the eviction notice, and then I was like, okay, how am I going to solve these financial troubles? And it was in my head, I was like, I can't get another sales job because it's going to take too long for me to build up, leads and everything to solve the financial troubles. So I called my mum. What any grown man would do. And she's awesome. She is amazing. This is one of the best things she ever did to me. She goes, I said, Mum, I'm in financial trouble. She goes, you're 28 years old. No, not going to help you. Called my dad. He had his own troubles going on. So he said no. And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, shit, I'm really on my own here. I didn't know a lot of people in Melbourne. And as the sun goes down, you just go to turn the lights on and the lights wouldn't turn on. So the electricity got cut out that day as well.
Ooh.
And so it's a dark apartment now. And I don't know if anyone's ever felt like this, but I felt extremely helpless. I felt like somebody was standing on my throat and just like I felt so much pressure. But sitting in a dark apartment, I was like, I've got to do something. I've got to do something. So I got 2 extension cables, plugged them into each other, ran them down the stairwell of my apartment building into a power socket in the stairwell. And the other end of the 2 extension cables, I plugged into a desk lamp. So I had this little light in the middle of a dark apartment on my living room floor. And I got a notebook out and I wrote on the front of it, business plan, Bibby Consulting Group. And I wrote my business plan that night. The next day I started, I hit the phones. The first person I got through to was a real estate agent. And I said, how many real estate agents have you got in your office? And he said, 12. I said, can you get them all to meet me in the conference room this afternoon at 4:00? And I'm like, after I said it, I was like, this guy's just going to tell me to piss off. And he says, yeah, okay, sure, they'll be there. Right? I told him, I did say one more thing. I said, he goes, why would I do that? And I said, I'm going to convince them to invest in your brand. That's all I said. Didn't say how I was going to do it. And he said, yeah, okay. So I get there. There's 12 people in the cells waiting for me. And I said, look, you guys aren't controlling the search results. If I search for John Smith, you're not showing up. So I've got a package, which is a 1-page website, a LinkedIn profile, and a Facebook page. You'll have 3 listings on the first page of the search results when people search for your name. 8 of them said yes. 6 of them gave me their credit card details on the spot. So I made $15,000 by the end of the day, and I was in business.
Well, you heard it first, folks. This is why I surround myself with this guy.
So this is the lesson, right? This is the lesson. Your worst day can be your best day if you make that decision. It doesn't have to. You don't have to make the decision on the day. You can make it later, but it's all about perspective. The only reason I grew from my challenges is because I chose to. And you can do the same with anybody. Can turn any hardship into a strength if they decide to, if you learn from it.
Wow. Mate, I haven't heard that story.
Yeah, one of the best days of my life.
Yeah, man, by the sounds of it. And now Bibby Consulting is still going.
Yeah, 10 years.
Good on you, mate. Thank you very much for your time. Now, obviously, people can reach out to you on LinkedIn. Yeah.